5 terrifying true horror stories that will keep you up at night. Story 1. The Haunted Cemetery. Our first story takes us to a small town cemetery, where a young gravedigger named John was working the night shift. It was a quiet, moonlit night, and John was just finishing up his last grave when he heard a strange noise coming from the bushes. At first, he dismissed it as a stray animal, but as he listened closer, he realized it sounded more like a person who was digging. Slowly, John crept towards the source of the noise, his heart pounding in his chest. As he got closer, he saw a shadowy figure hunched over a freshly dug grave, frantically scooping dirt with their bare hands. John called out, asking if the person needed help, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, they just kept digging, faster and faster, as if possessed by some unseen force. Suddenly, the figure stopped and turned to face John. And that's when he saw it, a face that was nothing but a rotting skull, with maggots crawling out of the eye sockets. John screamed and ran, faster than he'd ever run before, as the figure chased after him, laughing maniacally. He barely made it back to his truck, slamming the doors shut just as the figure reached out to grab him. To this day, John swears that what he saw that night was no mere grave robber, but something far more sinister, a restless spirit, doomed to wander the cemetery for all eternity. Story 2. The Doll That Wouldn't Die. When Sarah was just 6 years old, her grandmother gave her a beautiful porcelain doll as a birthday present. The doll had long, curly hair, bright blue eyes, and a frilly pink dress. Sarah loved the doll and took it everywhere with her, even sleeping with it at night. But then, strange things started happening. Sarah would wake up in the middle of the night to find the doll sitting up in bed, staring at her with those glassy blue eyes. She'd hear the doll's voice whispering to her in the dark, telling her to do terrible things. And then, one day, Sarah's little brother found the doll with a knife in its hand, standing over him as he slept. Sarah's parents were horrified and tried to get rid of the doll, but no matter what they did, it always seemed to find its way back into the house. They burned it, buried it, even threw it in the river, but somehow, the doll always returned, with that same eerie smile on its face. Years went by, and Sarah grew up and moved away. But she never forgot about the doll, and the terrible things it had done. And then, one day, she received a package in the mail. Inside was the doll, looking just as it had all those years ago. And with it, a note that read, "I've been waiting for you, Sarah. Let's play." Story 3. The Hitchhiker. It was a dark and stormy night, and John was driving home from a long day at work. The rain was coming down in sheets, and visibility was poor, so he was taking it slow on the winding country roads. Suddenly, he saw a figure up ahead, standing on the side of the road with their thumb out. It was a young woman, drenched from head to toe, with long, dark hair that clung to her face. John pulled over and rolled down the window, asking if the woman needed help. She nodded and climbed into the passenger seat, shivering from the cold. John offered her his jacket and asked where she was headed. The woman just shook her head and said, "Just drive." So John drove, making small talk with the strange woman as they went. But as they got further and further from town, he started to feel uneasy. The woman wasn't saying much, just staring out the window with a distant look in her eyes. And then, suddenly, she turned to him and said, "Do you know what happened to me?" John shook his head, and the woman smiled sadly. "I was murdered," she said. "Right here, on this very road. And now, I'm doomed to wander these hills forever, seeking revenge on the man who took my life." John's blood ran cold as the realization hit him. He slammed on the brakes and turned to face the woman, but she was gone, vanished into thin air. And in her place, a cold, wet spot on the seat, and the faint scent of decay. Story 4. The Babysitter. When Jenny took a job babysitting for the Wilsons, she thought it would be an easy way to make some extra cash. The Wilsons were a nice couple, with 2 young kids and a beautiful home in the suburbs. They told Jenny that they'd be gone for the evening, and that the kids would already be in bed when she arrived. But when Jenny got to the house, something felt off. The kids were nowhere to be seen, and the house was eerily quiet. She called out their names, but got no response. Slowly, she made her way upstairs, her heart pounding in her chest. And that's when she saw it, a trail of blood, leading from the kids' bedroom to the attic. Jenny followed the trail with trembling hands, pushing open the attic door to reveal a scene of pure horror. The kids were there, all right, but they were dead, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. Jenny screamed and ran, calling 911 as she fled the house. But when the police arrived, they found no sign of the bodies. or any evidence that anything had happened at all. The Wilsons came home to find Jenny in hysterics, ranting about dead children and blood-soaked attics. They fired her on the spot, and Jenny spent the rest of her life in and out of psychiatric hospitals, haunted by the memory of what she'd seen. And to this day, no one knows for sure what really happened in that house, or whether the Wilson children ever existed at all. Story 5. The Clown Statue. When Peter and his wife moved into their new house, they were excited to start a family and build a life together. The house was perfect spacious, with a big backyard and plenty of room for kids to play. But there was one thing that always gave Peter the creeps: the clown statue in the corner of the living room. The statue was life-sized, with a painted-on smile and bright red hair. It had been there when they moved in, and the previous owners had said it was a family heirloom. But Peter hated it. There was something about its eyes that seemed to follow him wherever he went. One night Peter woke up to the sound of laughter coming from downstairs. He crept out of bed and made his way to the living room, where he saw the clown statue, only it wasn't a statue anymore. It was moving, dancing around the room with jerky, unnatural movements. And it was laughing, a high-pitched cackle that sent shivers down Peter's spine. Peter ran back upstairs and woke up his wife, telling her what he'd seen. But when they went back downstairs, the clown statue was back in its place, as if nothing had happened. And from that night on, strange things started happening in the house, objects moving on their own, shadows lurking in the corners, and always the sound of laughter echoing through the halls. Peter and his wife tried to ignore it at first, but as the activity got worse, they knew they had to do something. They called in a medium, who told them that the clown statue was possessed by the spirit of a child who had died in the house years earlier. The only way to get rid of it, the medium said, was to burn the statue and bury the ashes in hallowed ground. Peter didn't hesitate. He took the statue outside and set it on fire, watching as the flames consumed the grinning clown face. And as the ashes cooled, he buried them in the backyard, hoping that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Because the next morning, when Peter went outside to check on the burial spot, he found the clown statue sitting there, grinning up at him with those same eerie eyes. And this time, it spoke in the voice of a child. It said, "I told you I'd never leave, Peter. Now let's play." If you like this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell so you never miss an upload. Leave us a comment with your own scary encounters, and thanks for tuning in to Scaratastic.